Hi again, it's Anna Meyer here, and now it's time to continue the map making adventure. And last time we looked at this island and we exported the data and we created the files. Now we're going to look into how to take this data that we managed to create in World Machine, get it into Photoshop for one of these top-down maps. So I'm going to minimize World Machine and dig into Photoshop, and we're going to open, and I'm going to start from the bottom with the texture file. So I'm opening that up first, and this file is 8K, meaning 8,192 pixels. So it's a size that should work on most computers regardless of RAM or stuff, and you can also use GIMP for this, so it's not necessary to use Photoshop. You might run into troubles with all the layers and the size of the image, that you might reach bigger file than 2 gigabytes. Then you have to skip some of the layers at the end, or you might have to reduce the resolution a bit. But that depends on your machine and if you can use Photoshop, or you have to, or you're using GIMP. So here we have the first layer. That's the texture. And like you see, it's only the color. It looks flat and stuff. So the next is to bring the shading in form of the shadow layer. And I use File and I use Place Embedded. And then I go to the shadow layer and I import the shading on top. And then I press OK to import it. And like you see, it's all gray. So it's great. And how do we get the texture to shine through? We have to change the blend mode. So I go from normal to multiply, and all of a sudden you see that the shading affects the landscape. It's still a little bit dark, and the easiest way to get around that is to put an adjustment layer on it. So I put a brightness contrast adjustment layer on top, and then I just increase the brightness until I'm kind of happy. I can also increase the contrast just a little bit, so something like that will work. The good thing with adjustment layers is that you can adjust this as you go down the line. So this is just something you work with. And here we have the texture, but there is also another coloration you can use, and that is the elevation color. So let's import the elevation into the mix. And when you import a new layer in Photoshop, then it always appears above the layer you have selected. So I selected background, and that means that I get elevation imported on top of texture. And the important for this is that you can now still see the shading on top. If I move this on top, then I just see the flat elevation coloring. So this way I can have the shading on top of all the texture and layers that gives color to the image. Okay, now we have some more stuff to get in place here, and now we have a whole bunch of other stuff here. We have one that is the elevation itself and the height map, and I used to call it alt. I guess I should rename them, but I did it from the beginning, so I just stuck with it. So I called them alt. So this, and like you see now, this one is not, I don't usually have that under the shading, because this you want to see the actual elevation, and this is just a grayscale map, and it's not really needed to have it in here because this is something you normally don't touch much in Photoshop. The benefit of having it in here is that it will match, so you can cut out the small area if you want to import it into View or some other software to actually generate a 3D image. Then it's always convenient to have the height map in here, so you can cut out certain areas, because then you know you will get matching, the texture will match the height map perfectly. So that's why I put it in here. And now we have a whole bunch of other masks to so I put place embedded, and first we have a flat mask, and that simply tells us all these the wider the area, the flatter it is. So the seabed here and some of the beach areas and some of the kind of low-lying areas. So if I turn off this, we can see, you can see it's basically the beaches here and the ocean bottom that is flat. The rest is sloped. Okay, let's continue. We have a whole bunch of stuff to import here. So that was the flat mask. And then we can take the slope mask, because that's basically the opposite from flat mask. So here you see the slopes of the mountains here are the bright ones. Okay, and then we have the 3 erosion masks. We have deposition. That's one form of erosion. That's the areas where all the dirt and the soil and stuff ends up after it's being pushed down the mountain or eroded away. And then we have the next one is flow. Those are the areas that are where the material being eroded actually flows or is transported along these ways. So that's the one. And then we have the 3rd erosion mask, and that should be where. And here it's basically where rock comes out in and where the erosion has touched the terrain more than others. So these are masks are the things that you can use in order to enhance. You can select certain areas where you want to paint certain textures. You want to brighten it, you want to gray it out for being rocks or whatever. You want to put grass there, you don't want to put grass there, and so on. So these are some of the masks. And then we have a couple of more ones. We have roughness. Can be very good. Roughness is the one that I normally use for rocks. So areas with a certain amount of roughness, there you should have rocks coming out, and so there should be no grass or something. And you don't have to follow the masks blindingly. You can use them whenever you feel like it, so to speak. So these are things that helps you in when we do the real texture work afterwards. And then we have and the last one we have is water mask. And this is really convenient. So you can just mask off saying that I only want to work on land or I only want to work on water areas. Then you can use the water mask here. So these are all the data that we got from World Machine. And now you imported it into Photoshop, and this way you have all the layers. So now you just need to save this. And this is, we exported it in 16-bit per channel, which means that this is big files. This will be enormously big. So in order to just work on it in Photoshop, I'll change it to 8 bits, because that will save them, make them much smaller in size. But there is a but to this. Make sure that you save the original height map, because you need the 16-bit height map for other purposes in the future. So this one, if you have it in here and you change the mode to 8 bits per channel, make sure that you always keep the original height map that is 16 bits, so you don't have to export it out from World Machine again. So these are the all the data in here. So now you can just save it, and then we will look at the next video. We will look at how to use masks and how to paint on the various layers and adjust layers and stuff in order to build a much more rich texture and much more kind of real looking map. This is just the basic raw material we got out of World Machine. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon with a new video.